You were the first speaker, so Dr. Fellows, if you please cross-examine our first speaker, and then Stephanie will cross-examine our second speaker. So you have 7 minutes as of now.
Okay, Stephanie, I think I enjoyed your defense of the topic. I think you did an excellent job. I guess my great concern about, and I think the pivotal point of the abortion question that seems to me in your debate was that, or your presentation was the definition of what constitutes a human being. And I think that you alluded to the fact that once fertilization has occurred, that this is a human being. And I think that both nationally in Canada and internationally, countries defend the idea that under 24 weeks, we do not consider the fetus or the embryo to be a human being. They are completely dependent on the mom. They cannot survive independently on their own, and therefore, by definition, they are not human beings until they're born. So I wonder how you can defend the idea that this is a human being.
Good question. I think that's why I went through the distinction between a human and a person. There is no doubt scientifically, biologically, that they are human beings. You were correct to point out that they are entirely dependent on their mother's bodies, but why are they dependent on their mother's bodies? Because of their age. So all I'm pointing out is that they are human beings who have more needs than you and I do. Like a newborn child is a human being that has more needs than you and I do. If we say the moment you achieve a certain level of independence, you are protected, then we are valuing someone based on their abilities. And then the question becomes, based on what ability? And who decides? And where do we draw the line? Whereas if we define it based on human nature, that's the one thing we all have in common. Because how would you respond if someone said, well, I say it's puberty. When you've achieved puberty, you're to be protected. Now, I know it's an extreme example, but think for a moment how you would rebut the line of puberty. You'd use the same argumentation that you would use to say viability, age. It's just age discrimination.
The second point would be, say we did invoke the philosophy that the Ceausescu's did in Romania during that 10-year interval. What do we do with all of these children that are born to these women who do not want these pregnancies for various reasons? Either they're 12, 13, 14, 15, they've been raped, they've been victims of incest, they get beaten up by their partners, they have no support from their partners. What do we do with the children that are born to these women? Who looks after them? Yeah,
we have to, and that's the you raise, I think, a very valid point in that you acknowledge there are some very real crises in the world. And I would argue that the Ceausescu regime had a lot of problems. And so there were many things that would contribute to bad health in that regime beyond what you have cited to be what you believe to be the main problem there. We need to provide resources, get bad governments out. I mean, that's the thing to keep in mind, is that we have a lot of problems because of the people in power. Adopting children. I went to Romania a couple years ago and volunteered at a clinic for sick children. And the children cannot be adopted because now, as being a member of the EU, there's a ban on international adoption from Romania. And some of these children will never go back to their homes. So I would say there are problems, I agree with you, where it sounds like we disagree is the solution to the problems. So what I would argue is that just as it would have been unethical for me to go and kill the little boy I was assigned to look after, Christy Daniel, who had Down syndrome, just as it would have been unethical for me to kill him post-birth because of the crisis he's in, health-wise, familial-wise, etc., likewise it would have been wrong prior to birth, because the only difference is age.
Okay. I guess my last question would be, you have women who come to, I have women who come to me who have babies with potentially lethal or lethal anomalies, and they don't want to carry on with this pregnancy because they know that they themselves, for the remainder of the pregnancy, are at risk from the pregnancy itself. And in the end, when they do have the baby, if they go to term, they are then in a situation where they're forced to look after children that either they know will die or that they are severely disabled and will require huge resources within the community, which basically our community cannot support. What do you do with these women? How do you support them?
Just for my understanding, clarification question, I think I hear you speak about fetal anomalies, but my question would be, at what point does this become a threat to the woman's life you mentioned? I'm wondering what condition arises. Are we talking about just fetal anomalies?
Just being pregnant is a risk situation for a woman. We know that her mortality rate, being pregnant, dying from amniotic fluid embolism, from pulmonary embolism, from pregnancy-induced hypertension, from placenta previa,
Right.
These are all risk factors that do still kill women. And in the slides that I showed you are typically what are killing women even in Ontario today.
Right, but I guess what I want to clarify first is, setting aside preeclampsia, chorioamnitis, all these things, are you talking about if she doesn't have those complications to her life? What about the child with the anomaly?
Right.
And so I'll deal with that first. I'll probably have to deal with the other one in the bottle. And my point there would be, those of us who will live longer don't have a right to kill those who will live shorter. Again, you point out a very tragic situation, but the key point in this situation is to do our best to help this woman and her family, as the case may be, embrace this little life for as long or as short as they have it. When the baby is born, it would likely be a palliative situation. Extraordinary measures may not be put into place, but ordinary care would. And I would say to the patient, do you think if we terminate this pregnancy now, that you're going to grieve? Because it sounds to me likely, that you wanted this child and you're sad that this situation is as it is. Are you going to grieve? They're likely going to say yes. So then I would say, if you carry the pregnancy to term and the baby's born, are you going to grieve when the baby dies? Yes. So then you say, either situation we have grief. So the question then becomes, will you grieve because the child died as a result of something you had no control over? Or will you grieve because the child died as a result of an action that you made be done? And you can trace the child's death back to a D&E or induction of labor as opposed to this condition.